Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We're going to spend our first hour today talking about boundaries in relationships. Boundaries are very important, obviously. We have oftentimes fences around our property to protect our property physically and to really help people know where boundaries are. Emotional boundaries, very important, not letting people take advantage of us. And if there is one individual that has certainly written quite a bit on the subject of boundaries, it is our next guest who's been on the program with us before, Allison Bottke, award-winning author of the acclaimed Setting Boundaries series. We even have a link to it on our website as well as a link to her website. You perhaps know her from some of her previous books, some of which we've talked about on the air. Setting boundaries with your adult children, setting boundaries with your aging parents, setting boundaries with difficult people, setting boundaries with food, setting boundaries for women, and the one we'll talk about today, A Young Woman's Guide to Setting Boundaries. Obviously, we're going to focus on that book, but as we open up the phones a little bit later, if you have questions about some of these other books, those would certainly be germane as well. She is also founder of Sanity, which is a support group, and as you will go through this today, you will see how she uses that particular list of letters to really help people understand how to set boundaries, and has certainly been involved in so many different aspects of publishing, not only that support group, but also founder and general editor of more than a dozen volumes in the God Allows You Turns anthology, author of or editor of at least 40 books or more, and it is always a welcome opportunity to talk once again with Allison Bottke.
Hello, Kerby. Thank you for having me.
We saw each other at the Christian Writers Conference, and every year we have a chance to hear from you. This year they had a chance to honor you for all of your writing, so that was a very touching opportunity. And I think next time you should honor a person after they speak, not before, because the tears start flowing. It makes it real hard to communicate. But nevertheless, we think very highly of you, and it was great that they could honor you at the Writers Conference, and it's great you can be on the program with us today.
Oh, thank you. That was definitely a surprise blessing. And you're right, the timing of that was kind of tough. How do you talk with tears running down your face like that? But it was truly an honor.
You know, we're going to be talking about young girls today, and whether it's preteens or teen girls, they make a lot of choices that aren't based upon setting boundaries. And I want people to know right off the bat, we've heard some of your testimony, but I think it's important to go back and cover that you are not speaking about this from an ivory tower where you made no bad decisions in your teen years. You never ran away from home, never actually married the wrong person or got involved with the wrong person. No, your story is a great warning to young girls and mothers out there listening to exactly what happens when you make bad choices. True?
Yeah, absolutely. And the choices I made as a teenager changed the entire course of my life. Many of them weren't smart, and I never seemed to learn from them, Kerby. And then they tied into a lack of identity, and I was just motivated by really unhealthy choices. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and ran away from home at 14, got married to a very abusive man who almost killed me. So I gave birth to my son when I was 16, went back to school, got my GED, and I've worked really, really hard, and it has been a very tough journey because of poor boundaries. And a lot of these choices I've made. So, I know that I can't go back, and I know God has a plan for the journey that I'm on and where I've been. But even so, I have far too many regrets from choices I made as a teenager. And my goal in writing this new boundary book for teens is hopefully they will have fewer regrets from the choices they're making.
Again, the first part of the book is so gripping. I mean, leaving Cleveland at the age of 14, getting on an airplane with just a little bit of money in your pocket coming from this excuse for a boyfriend, and then landing in LaGuardia, making a phone call on back then we had payphones, not cell phones. For those that are younger, they actually used payphones. And then you get this number has been disconnected, and you cannot connect up with anybody. Fortunately, someone took you in, and you began to kind of make your way. But it is amazing to me that you were able to do that at the age of 14. And I think also maybe testimony to God's grace that something awful didn't happen to you as a 14-year-old out there on the streets in New York City during that time.
I was going to say that, yes. It definitely God had a plan for me. I'm not sure that these days it would have been quite that way, because things are so much different now. I really, at 14, on the streets of New York with nowhere to go, I was wandering around looking for a YWCA, and it was by the grace of God that I really stopped and asked for directions from an artist who was showing her artistry there in a street festival, and she took me home with her and her daughter, and it was very, so it might not, it could have gone a very, very different way, and so often today does for young, vulnerable girls that, are looking for love and go out in search of it into a very, very hostile and dangerous world.
And of course, you've had to learn these various lessons experientially. We're hoping our listeners today will learn them vicariously. Your first book, for example, Boundaries with Your Adult Children, came because all of a sudden you have a son that's arrested, and you're dealing with a level of complexity in your life at that time that, again, very few parents listening to this today can actually even relate to.
And yet a lot of us do. There's a lot of young people that are caught up in the drug and alcohol and world, and are making very poor choices that land them in jail. And that's where I was at with my son, and I had spent a lot of years enabling him. I was trying to fix all the drama, chaos, and crisis in my son's life for many, many years, and it just continued to spiral out of control until the day when I was standing in his kitchen after the SWAT team had broken into his home, arrested him, and totally tossed the house. And I really had a very strong feeling from God that I needed to stop what I was doing, just get out of there, just stop. I was trying to fix things yet again. And so the first book in this series wasn't even supposed to be a series. It was a standalone book, Kerby. I just really felt compelled to talk to parents about this sanity message that God really gave to me, because the life I was living was insanity. That gerbil wheel of trying to fix and jump in, and fix everybody, fix your child's chaos, crisis, and drama. And it's not unlike a lot of parents today who are trying to fix and rescue kids, and we're trying to, we're playing God in their lives, and we aren't God. And I had that realization and wrote that book that now has grown into a whole lot of them, because clearly I've got boundary challenges
everywhere.
And God's working on me, and I'm writing through each one of them.
Well, again, these are a great series of books. And again, she is a fellow traveler. So if you say, boy, she can't relate to the experience I'm having right now, I think I've set the scene pretty well. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the importance of boundaries. I might mention this is not the only topic we will come back to. Dr. Henry Cloud's never been on this program, but he is going to be on shortly. And of course, he and John Townsend wrote one of the original books on boundaries. And boy, do I feel old, because I met Henry Cloud when he was in college. So that goes back a few years. But we're going to come back and talk about a young woman's guide to setting boundaries with Allison Bottke, and then we'll open up the phones for your comments. All that coming up right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You've probably heard by now that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has asked the IRS to monitor churches and evaluate the sermons of pastors. At the moment, we don't know how the IRS plans to target pastors and churches. However they target these churches, they are certain to hear lots of sermons that address political issues. October 5th is when the annual Pulpit Freedom Sunday takes place. Alliance Defending Freedom has organized this event each year. They encourage pastors to preach a sermon that deals with public policy and politics. Then they encourage them to send a copy to the IRS. The ADF wants a test case to challenge the 1954 regulation that has been used to muzzle pastors in churches. The amendment to the federal tax code was added by Senator Lyndon Johnson. He was running for re-election and wanted to prevent outside groups, not churches, from interfering in his campaign. The amendment prevents a 501c3 organization from participating in any political campaign. Over the years, it has been used to intimidate pastors and prevent them from addressing any political issue from the pulpit. The latest revelations in the IRS scandal provide an insight into what IRS officials think about conservative political groups and religious organizations. Lois Lerner, a former IRS official who's been under investigation, called conservatives and Tea Party groups all sorts of names, most of which I can't mention here. We shouldn't be surprised that the IRS is now admitting that churches may be on their target list. The Alliance Defending Freedom is ready for the IRS to bring it on. For years, they have been looking for a test case. If the IRS cites one of these pastors preaching this October, then the pastor and the ADF lawyers will have standing and can pursue a case against the IRS. Meanwhile, the ADF has also filed a Freedom of Information Act request to learn the details of the IRS agreement with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That information might be as revealing as the emails from Lois Lerner. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Conversation today with Allison Bottke as we talk about her book, A Young Woman's Guide to Setting Boundaries, 6 Steps to Help Teens Make Smart Choices, Cope with Stress, Untangle Mixed Up Emotions. Of course, we're looking at the broader issue of boundaries, and of course, you can ask questions a little bit later if you would like on some of those topics. But let's, if we can, Allison, maybe make sure everybody understands the idea of boundaries. I mentioned a minute ago the book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, but you talk about the fact that there are physical boundaries, and that relates oftentimes to abuse, psychological boundaries. And there is a tendency, I think, for women sometimes to move the boundaries out of compassion, out of feeling like they should be a nurturer and still be involved in the children's lives. So obviously both male and females deal with this, but I was struck by the fact that so many of your books address some of the issues that women are dealing with right now.
Absolutely, and it is that psychological nurturing, that desire to fix and help. We're so confused in what is our responsibility and what isn't, which is a real key issue. Is this my job or is this not my job to fix and do? And as in,
sure,
it's hard. It's really hard to know that, but. Boundaries, it's male, female, it really isn't just focused on women. I tend to, right to that sure. demographic because I am one, so that's why. But there's a lot of fathers, a lot of dads that write to me and talk to me about these boundary issues.
That's right.
Yep.
And one of the things you talk about early on in the book is it's all in your mind. Now sometimes we say it's all in your mind, and that's a negative. Well, it's all in your mind. But the point you're making is that we make choices. In other words, nobody put a gun to your head and said, I'm going to try to fix every problem that my son is involved with. Nobody put a gun to your head and said, I'm going to force you to get on a plane in Cleveland and fly to New York City. Nobody forced you to get married. Those were choices. And so sometimes it's helpful for people who have difficulty with boundaries to recognize they did make a choice and they have the opportunity to make a different choice, what you call smart choices.
Absolutely. And teens are perfectly capable of making good decisions when their minds are calm. But that part of our brain that helps us manage emotions is still developing. So it's naturally harder to calm our emotions down, and that's really when bad judgment comes into play. That's what happened to me at 14, 15, 16, and beyond. It was bad judgment. Now, it's good. It's good to have emotions, Kerby. It's good to be able to feel things deeply and passionately. But the trouble comes when we lack the self-control and we place all those feelings and emotions above our safety or above the safety of somebody else. And that's what happened. The fact is, I wasn't thinking, I was feeling.
Right.
So we have to stop long enough, and it's hard, but you can program the essence insanity is stop our own behavior, stop our own responses. We can stop and think and program ourselves to do that. And teens, teens really have the ABC, I call them the ABCs, that we have control of. And we think, gosh, as a teen, I really don't have a whole lot of control of anything. Everybody else is telling me what to do and where to go and how to do this and that. But we do have the control of our ABCs, and that is our attitude, our behavior, and our choices.
Right.
Now, so we don't have to passively accept whatever life throws at us. We can determine the direction of our life by how we think. And that one key, we can determine the direction by how we think. It's critical.
I might just mention, as we're going through this today, you might want to take some notes. We've already given you one sort of acrostic, ABC, attitude, behavior, choices. In a minute, we're going to give you sanity. And of course, if you've heard any of the interviews we've done before with Allison Bottke, that may be familiar territory. But if not, each one of those letters stands for a key principle. But before we do so, it seems to me also that we might acknowledge, Allison, that teens aren't in the best position sometimes to make wise decisions because, number one, brain research tells us that the prefrontal cortex, which is really good at making decisions, isn't fully formed. I've said before on this program, that's one of the reasons why we don't let young boys under the age of 25 rent a car. I mean, there is a physiological reason for some of this. They don't tend to make wise choices or think about the long-term implications. But you've added two others. First of all, this issue of emotion. You were in love. All of a sudden, a 14-year-old girl in love is willing to do anything the boy suggests, including getting on an airplane with just a few dollars in your pocket and flying to New York City to meet up with some of his friends. But two, you also, in the book, talk about stress. I think young people are stressed out more than ever before. That's another thing that really inhibits very sound judgment. True?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we are looking for that, the key component in that was I was looking for love. When there's an empty place in our heart, I didn't have an earthly father. I didn't know anything about a heavenly father. I was looking for an identity. I was looking for love and an identity. And without that, it makes, all the other choices are really tough to make when you are that emotional, and when your brain is still still growing, and you're still learning. So, the role of identity and faith is critical for young people in learning how to set boundaries.
Let's, as we go along the program, give you a chance to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to South Carolina first, WAGP. Becky, I think you'd like to join our conversation with Allison Bottke.
Hi.
Hi, Becky.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good, thank you.
I'm hoping this is relevant. Chonda Pierce had a DVD a good while back, and she mentioned that when she was on stage, they drew a white line on the edge of the stage, and she said they drew that there so she wouldn't step over the white line, the boundary, so she wouldn't hurt herself. And she said in the interview, she said, God put those boundaries there for us, too, so we will step over the boundaries and hurt ourselves, too. He wants us to enjoy the other things on the other side of the boundary that he has set up for us that is so much better than what's on the other side of the boundary. And I've made such an impression on me, and I thought I would just share that with you.
Well, it's a great story, and I think it illustrates again that these lines that the scriptures draw for us aren't done because God is a cosmic killjoy, but he wants to protect us. And I want to say to some of the young girls listening right now, you may think you know everything that you need to know about life, and your parents may be making some bad decisions, but it's quite possible that they know more about certain issues than you do and maybe have a little better judgment. And a good example of that was Allison, that boy that encouraged you to fly to New York City, wasn't exactly on the top 10 list for your mother. And so sometimes mothers can see through things that young girls cannot. And certainly God can see even better than any human parent and can really warn us what happens when we step over a boundary.
And amen. You are exactly right.
Let's, if we can, then maybe take one more phone call real quickly, and then when we come back, I want to get into the issue of sanity, because that is a great principle that is in many of your books. But we'll move from South Carolina. Let's go to North Carolina this time. WLGP. Andrea, you're on with Allison Bottke.
Thank you, Kerby. I really appreciate your sharing that you come from a place where there weren't any boundaries. And yes, I have looked for, I'm 62, and I've looked for love in all the wrong places and relationship, and that's why I'm a Christian, actually, which is kind of weird, because I've never found an honest relationship. And my parents argued, and I miss them very much. My mother died in 2012. My daddy died in 2003. And they always argued, and I was the firstborn, and I always soaked it up like a sponge. I soaked it up, and I just copied it all over the page. And then I kept looking because I felt ignored. I want to share, I want to share that I think worse than being abused, and that's bad enough. Verbal abuse, I mean, forget the physical stuff. Verbal abuse is bad, but being ignored is probably the most painful thing in the world. And you're going as a child, you're going to copy. I've got a teaching degree, but I argue and argue and argue and argue. People have told me I would argue with God, and I probably would. But I wanted to hear what, you sound so passionate, and I appreciate it, and I wanted to hear what you had to say to those people that, and I went through an alcohol issue, and I still have it. But they said, you've got a boundary issue. They told me that 20 years ago.
Yeah, Allison, can you jump in real quick because we're coming to a break? And
well, yes, and it does have to do with identity. It's knowing who we are in our Lord, and who God knows we are, and our plans in Him. Because people are going to fail us. It's natural. It happens, and if we look for our identity in other people and in getting what we need, our needs met from other people, is not always the best way to go, and it is challenging, and it leaves you hurt and damaged. And thankfully, we do have that relationship with God that we can build a strong relationship that will help us mirror, to other people around us, how we should behave and respond,
sure,
and what God wants from us. It's really having that plumb line to go by, to have the Word of God, to have that wisdom and discernment for how to act when you haven't learned how, if your boundaries have been violated, or if you've been ignored like that, if you really don't have a plumb line to go with, if you have nothing to base your responses and your life on, where do you go from there? You're punting all over the place. So, you really need to have some guidance, and Scripture does that.
We're going to take a break and continue our conversation with Allison Bottke, the book, A Young Woman's Guide to Setting Boundaries. We'll have more right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Allison Bottke. If you'd like to join our conversation at any point, 1-800-351-1212. Let me just mention that we have information about the book on our website, an article there. We also have a web link to Allison Bottke's website, and a web link to the Setting Boundaries book series. And we also have her video. It's about 6 minutes long, tells you a little bit more about her. You might want to watch it, click on the share button, put it on your Facebook page or blog, or certainly maybe send it to somebody that would want to know more about this particular issue. And we certainly do recommend that you go to our website, pointofview.net. If you're taking some notes, you might put down the word sanity, and we're going to work our way through what has become quite a series for you, and that is, Allison, you have put together the Sanity Support Group, but sanity is also an acrostic because each one of the letters stands for a particular principle, and the S in sanity stands for Stop Ignoring Your Pain and Problems. Explain what that means.
Well, it sounds like it's a very easy thing to do, is stopping, and it's not. It's one of the most difficult things. It really, we know we're in pain. Something isn't working. We're repeating and repeating these same behaviors and expecting different results. And the only way we're going to be able to change this and break a habit is to stop the old habit. So I had to keep telling myself, stop. I put Post-it notes around. I put rubber bands on my wrist, whatever it takes to help you stop whatever it is that you know needs to stop, whether it is enabling, whether it's overeating, whether it's jumping into the same old argument with the boss, whether it's responding in a negative way to an aging parent, whatever your issue is. We know what they are. We know those hot buttons, those hot topic buttons, but it's what do we do? So that S is critical. Stop our own. This is not stop the other people. Now, they may need to stop what they're doing,
right,
but we can't make them stop what they're doing. We can only stop how we're responding to it.
Good point. Well, and the second letter, A, is helpful because oftentimes we are maybe in need of someone to keep us accountable. And so the S stands for Stop Ignoring Your Pain and Problems. The A stands for Assemble Supportive People. And when you have people that are supportive around you, they can keep you accountable. They can encourage you in doing the right thing when the dysfunctional relationship you might be in is encouraging you always to do the wrong thing. Exactly.
And it's critical to have those supportive people around you, whether they're parents, school advisor, youth group pastor, counselor, support group, some people that you trust around you. It's very critical that these are trustworthy people that are that believe as you do, that are in this the same faith is very, very important. But having those people that can be objective, that was so critical for me in the first book, in the Setting Boundaries with Your Adult Children. It's when you're in the middle of it, Kerby, it's very hard to see clearly. It's very hard to wade out of that muck and mire. And sometimes all it takes is somebody saying, Allison, what if? Or what about, or have you ever thought of, or so it's very critical to assemble supportive people around you. If you're stressed out about whatever situation it is, I imagine there's a support group out there dealing with it, and because there are a lot of them.
Well, and you do have a support group we're going to talk about in just a minute as well, the Sanity Support Group. But S.A., just before I leave A not only for accountability and assembling people, but also to provide some perspective. You know as well as I that sometimes when you're in the midst of an emotional set of circumstances, whether you're taking care of aged parents, whether or not you're trying to lose weight for the 15th time, whether you're a girl that is just convinced that this boy is your future husband when your parents don't, sometimes that outside person looking in can give you perspective that you just simply can't see.
Exactly, and that's so critical. And to be open-minded enough to listen to that, and that's again back to that think and not feeling. Your feelings may say, "Oh, I don't want to pay attention to you," but if you stop essence, sanity. Stop and think. Maybe they have a point there. Let me look at that and really filter that and take some time to hear what they're saying. Can mean all the difference in the world.
Wow. Okay, S-A, and then N for sanity. N stands for nip excusions in the bud. Excuses oftentimes are justifications for negative behavior.
Yes, and that's exactly and I hear this a lot. I work with a lot of women in abusive situations, and an excuse is he didn't mean to hit me, or he had a rough day at school, or if a boy, dating violence is a huge issue today for teen girls.
You've got a whole chapter on it too. It's really well done, by the way.
Thank you. If a boy is grabbing you, if he's hurting you, if he's even grabbing your wrist, there is no excuse for physical violence like that. He had a rough day at school, or he didn't win the ball game, or no. These excuses have got to stop, and that ties into the S again. Stop. Identifying those, identifying what excuses we use, and we don't even know sometimes that that's what we're doing. That they are excuses.
Let me just mention, too, that just a minute, I do want to get to those chapters. Chapter 14 on internet predators and cyberbullies. Chapter 15 on teen dating violence. But let's keep the sanity going here. S-A-N. The next would be the letter I. That is to implement a plan of action. And that's, again, where you have to have some deliberate steps. If you don't have a plan, you'll never really reach your goal, will you?
Exactly, you won't. You're not going to go anywhere. So this really is a written plan. Whether it's a journal, a book, it doesn't have to be. You don't have to hand this in to anybody. It's not going to be graded for English or anything. But it really is writing out. Things like, what are my excuses, and what do I need to stop? What are the things that are triggering me? What causes me pain? And really looking at them. It's exercises to help walk us through. And identifying and prioritizing our goals and our dreams, and there's just a lot in life. Whether you're a teen, to a baby boomer, to grandparents. I mean, life can be challenging sometimes. So it really is trying to get a better handle and a better grip on this. And I'm very pro journaling and writing things out, even if it's a bullet point list. This is what I need to do, and praying for that wisdom. God, give me wisdom and discernment, and let me write down what it is that I need to do to take action. What actions do I need to take to get to the place you want me to go?
Sanity, S-A-N-I, and then the last two, T and Y. First of all, T, trust the voice of the Spirit. That is, God has a good plan for you.
Yes, but if we don't take the time to really listen, how often do we say, I really thought that, I felt that he was, that I shouldn't have done this, but I didn't listen to it. So we really need to trust the Lord with all our heart, and trust that when we're praying, there's the power of the Holy Spirit there, to trust that He will talk to us if we stop long enough, and that's the S again, stop long enough and listen and trust that voice. If we're asking for wisdom and discernment, and we're getting a clear guidance that we're not to do this, and we go and do it anyway, we're on the gerbil wheel. We're going to perpetuate that cycle of insanity.
One last one, obviously, S-A-N-I-T-Y. Y stands for, as imagine most people probably guess by now, yield everything to God.
Absolutely, and it's a choice that will forever change our life when you stop trying to be God in other people's lives, and you stop trying to be God in your own life and let God be God. It's amazing how He shows up and helps you change your life.
Well, again, that is the look at sanity, and it's just one part of not only this book, but many of the other books that we've mentioned before: setting boundaries with your adult children, setting boundaries with your aging parents, setting boundaries with difficult people, setting boundaries for women, setting boundaries for food, and then, of course, this one, A Young Woman's Guide to Setting Boundaries. So lots of opportunities here today to connect up with Allison Bottke. And Allison, as people go to your website, you have information, and also, of course, made it possible for people to go to the Setting Boundaries series, so they can find both you and the book. I know both of them link back and forth, but there's some great resources that you would want people to know about. And there's also a support group that people might want to know about as well, and that's all available on those websites, right?
Yes, it is, at the settingboundariesbooks.com website.
And that's, again, on our website. In case you can't find it, we have it linked there, or just type in settingboundariesbooks.com. And we've talked about those 6 books. And when we come back, we're going to give you a chance to join the conversation today, if you would like. And we'll also spend just a little bit of time talking about some of these other chapters, because the issue of dating violence, a very significant issue. The issue of cyberbullying, also a concern. Those are also addressed in the book, and that's why we certainly do encourage you to get a copy. You might be able to find it in your local bookstore. It's published by Harvest House, but certainly if not, there are some ways in which, as we have provided links today for you to order it. Over 180 pages, lots of great information, and it's all available through her websites, and you can find the links to those websites on our website, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about some of those important issues. And we'll take another phone call or two, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Allison Bottke with us for a few more minutes as we talk about A Young Woman's Guide to Setting Boundaries. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Texas, KAVX. Enjoy. You're on with Allison Bottke.
Thank you. I want to know if this book that you've been talking about, this first one, would be good for a 12-year-old girl, particularly my granddaughter, to read, or her mother to read it.
Allison?
To find out the information. Yeah, go ahead.
The first one with your adult children, or the one with the for the teens? Because the adult children is not going to be applicable for a 12-year-old to
She
read.
just meant the first one. She means this one right now, the one on teens.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so it would be for my daughter, and then she could impart the information to my 12-year-old granddaughter. Would that be right?
Yes, and it's written for the 13 to 18, 19-year-old range, but there are a lot of 12-year-olds that are very mature. But I would still have the parent read this to make sure it's okay.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I might just say it is very readable, and any 12-year-old is doing well in school is probably going to be able to make their way through it. The other thought is that if a mother had a question, you could just take one or two of the chapters and maybe have them read it first. Chapter 10, where we talked about the secret power of sanity, or maybe chapter 3 about making choices in your mind. But I don't see anything in this book that a 12-year-old couldn't read, although you do tell a little bit about your own story, and maybe that's a good story for them to know about, because they could learn some lessons about what not to do at the age of 14 compared to what actually happened to you in your life. So. But there are some other issues that I wanted to get to real quickly, and that is, you mentioned the issue of teen dating violence. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but young girls today sometimes find themselves in difficult situations, and I don't know, maybe we've always had the level of violence and date rape and all the rest, and we're just reporting it more now, but for whatever reason, this is something we really have to warn our young girls about. True?
Absolutely, and I'm sure we have had this issue, but not like it is. The violence that there are a lot of people are angry and confused and hurt, and they're acting out very violently. And because we are on the other side of that coin, so desperate for love and attention and affection, we are willing to excuse a lot of this violence. So we don't even recognize in many cases that they're being abused or that our boundaries have been violated. We are just so, desperate to be loved and be special and be taken, care of, and find that fill that empty place in our soul that we make excuses for this. And it's a vicious cycle, and the vicious cycle of control and that lack of that violated boundary. So I really do identify what is and is not acceptable. Relationship abuse, dating abuse, what domestic abuse, domestic violence, what these all are and what they look like.
Well, and we've talked in the past with June Hunt in the studio about abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. We're going to talk to her in the future about her latest little book on bullying, which brings me to something else, and that is we've always had bullies. They've been around for millennia. But cyberbullying is kind of a new phenomenon, and internet predators are even scarier because, again, the typical teen girl is willing to befriend anybody on Facebook or whatever they might be on, Instagram, or, we go down the whole long list. And as a result, sometimes individuals who pose as a friend are anything but a friend. And that's why, again, you have a whole chapter in your book about this very important issue.
Exactly, because those predators aren't just that idea that we have in our mind of this, that dirty old man sitting, in a dark place. That's not a cyberbully anymore, or an internet predator. They can be people that you think are going to be your best friend, and they're posing as somebody even your own age. There's a pretense, they're pretending they're a girl your own age that can relate to you, when in reality, it's anything but. So, we really need to be very aware and set some guidelines, and those are boundaries for ourselves, in how, and I know a lot of parents have said that. It's excellent to have those, those internet controls. It's critical to have some of those, set up on computers so we aren't able to access this.
And matter of fact, I've even said the parents probably need to be friends with their kids on Facebook, and kids say, well, I don't want my parent. Well, yeah, but I want to be able to see what is happening, because there are enticements that you may not necessarily pick up on, and all sorts of things. So very important. Just before we take another phone call, I didn't want to run out of time. I did want to mention for just a minute, not only your Setting Boundaries book series, but you have the Sanity Support Group. And some of the listeners might say, well, I'd like to know a little bit more about how to connect up with you. What I heard in the hour interview was great, but I want to maybe communicate with you offline or see what I can do to help myself or to help somebody else in my family with some of these boundary issues. So how can they contact you?
Yes, on the website I have a Facebook Sanity Support page. So it's my author Allison Bottke, Facebook author Allison Bottke. That is our Sanity Support Group. We have a young woman's Facebook page for Sanity Support. In the back of this book is how to start a Sanity Support Group. There'll be workbooks coming out for there's a workbook for the adult children book to develop, to have your own support group environment. There all these issues all around the Sanity steps. 6 steps, how you can have a support group environment that follows these 6 steps to sanity. So the website, Facebook, and they're all linked. If they can go to your website, they'll be able to find everything. So they're all linked together from my site to the Facebook page. And sanity, we have a lot of sanity support people that have completed the 12-week. We have 12-week courses. But in the back, there's a specific chapter for young women to start their own groups, whether it's at school, their church, at home, to start a support group. So you can start talking about these issues of boundaries.
Let's, if we can, take maybe one quick phone call just before we run out of time today. Georgia, WGNN. Susan, we only have like a minute or two, but would you like to share your story?
Yes. When I was in high school, my high school sweetheart one time hit me. And because I went to my girlfriend's house, and, when he dropped me off, and anyway, he hit me. We ended up going, and I thought, oh gosh, it was just because he cared. We ended up getting married, and it turned out to be an extremely abusive marriage, so abusive. And I came from an abusive home life, and we've got to teach our girls, that these things do not spell love.
That's right. Yeah, I wish I had more time. We're just really tight on time. But isn't it amazing how those who maybe come from an abusive home, then other abusers seem to have this sort of radar, sonar, and figure out who is already used to abuse and continues it on. So, Susan, I wish we had more time for that. But Allison, I do appreciate you taking the time today, not only to join us on air, but this is a very needed book, because as Susan just said a minute ago, a young girl's and a young woman's guide to setting boundaries. Key. We need to teach our young girls that this is not acceptable, and to warn them about some of the dangers that are out there and help them to effectively set boundaries. So thank you for having the Setting Boundaries series, and thank you for being on the program with us once again.
Thank you, Kerby, for having me and for all that you do to share this. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to change topics. But if this was a book that you thought that you might need, or someone that would need or benefit from this book, there are some great resources on our webpage, pointofview.net. We have an article about the book. We have 2 different web links, one to Allison Bottke's website, the other one to the Setting Boundaries book series, in case you'd like to know some of the others in the series. And we have her 6-minute video, which you can watch and then maybe click the share button and send it to others, because we are convinced that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. We've talked about boundaries in the past. We will talk about them in the future. We've talked about abuse in the past. We will certainly do that again. And we have a program coming up in the future dealing with bullying. So there are some very important issues that we need to address. And if we're going to prepare the next generation, this is what we are dedicated to here at Point of View. As you go to the website, don't forget we also have a button for you to get involved with us in case you would like to, on a regular basis, receive information from us. We send it out free of charge, and it's a way in which you can know more about some of the topics we've been covering. You can also subscribe to get my daily commentary. We put it in your inbox so you can read it just as I say it every day, and that's available. And, of course, we also have a button that says Donate. And if you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate that. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some of the political issues in the news, and we welcome your phone calls then as well. All that coming up right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30. Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to be talking with Kurt Schlichter, and if you are ever reading perhaps some of the Town Hall columnists, you probably have seen some of his columns. If you've been in a bookstore anytime recently, probably seen some of his books, and we're going to be talking about one of his newest ones as well. Successful trial lawyer based in the Los Angeles area, a graduate of University of California at San Diego, and then later a graduate of Loyola Law School, where he was law review editor. He has also done a number of other things. He's been involved in the military in particular, and actually has joined the California Army National Guard, served as a veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom in Kosovo, and has been very much involved in that arena of life, and also has a master's degree in strategic studies from the University the United States Army War College, He's also been a stand-up comedian and an author and a trial lawyer and much more. Lives in the South Bay area of Los Angeles. And Kurt, just great to have you on the program with us today.
Hey, Kirby, thanks for having me.
Well, we wanted to see what might hear from you today. One of the things I did, in addition to posting your book up there, which we'll talk about in a minute, Conservative Insurgency, is one of your more recent columns, The Key to a Lasting Middle East Peace is Total Victory. I thought I'd get a military man for just a minute who has certainly been writing commentaries on some of this to say, well, maybe it's time to get really serious about winning a war. It's been a while, hasn't it, Kurt, since we've, as the United States, won a war, hasn't it?
I know, isn't it crazy? But, look, I'm a traditionalist. The military, and of course I'm here speaking only as a civilian. The military history has like a 5, 6, 7, 8,000 year history. And for eons, the key to victory was actually having a victory. Okay, I don't know when these, sometime around the Korean War, these geniuses, most of whom never carried a rifle, decided that there's a different kind of outcome we can have, one where we don't win, and this is problematic.
I'd say
and
so.
we are seeing the problems as Christians, Jews, other faiths, and quote-unquote infidel Muslims are being butchered in the Middle East as we speak because people have not acted like grown-ups and gone and destroyed their enemies.
You know, and I did not know your own history in that regard. You said your great-great-grandfather was in the Union Army, and of course you had grandfathers that were in the Pacific, certainly that World War II. I've heard you say before that when you actually studied at the U.S. Army War College, they did not have a course on withdrawal and surrender.
Yeah, I must have been out. I must have missed that day after a night out at the Army War College fraternity house. One of their famous toga parties in Carlisle.
Yeah.
No, look, I don't get it. If it's willing to fight for, if it's willing to kill for, if it's willing to die for, it's willing to win. Napoleon, I think, said it best. If you're going to take Vienna, take Vienna. If it isn't worth fighting for, don't get in the fight.
And that's really what we're having today. I mean, we'll open up the phones a little bit later. I'm sure lots of people want to talk to you, and you generate lots of phone calls, so I know that will be the case. There's no doubt about that. But what you will find, and I don't know what the percentages are. I don't know if it's half-half or 70-30 or whatever it is, but I do know that there are a fair number of people that have called in saying, if we're going to go in, let's go in and do it and finish it. Let's not have, Desert Storm 2, Desert Storm 3, and now we're having the Wall Street Journal call this already our third Iraq war. Or others are saying, look, I don't trust this president to go in and do that and finish it, so let's not go in the first place. If we're going to invest time and treasure and blood, we need to go and do it right, or else we might not do it at all. And so you have kind of a divided group right now of individuals who would consider themselves freedom-loving conservatives, but they're not quite sure where to go from here. But I think your column is a reminder that if you're going to actually project force and you're going to commit men and women in uniform, you better go with the goal of winning. And that is something that seems to be eluding some of our current presidents.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic. What really gets me, and what I'm frankly ashamed of, is the president has stated publicly, he looked in our eyes and says, I will tolerate genocide. And the way he did that is by saying, I will never put boots on the ground. Now, America has the military force to crush these ISIS scumbags. Heck, I commanded a unit that had more combat power than the ISIS scumbags.
Right.
But it's not going to require a few drones. It's not going to require a few F-16 flights. It's going to require guys on the ground going in and killing them. And he says he is not willing to do that. And when you say you are not willing to do what it takes, you are saying that you prefer the resulting outcome. And the resulting outcome is a genocide. And I find that disgraceful. I do not believe Americans should stand by and allow Christian, Jews, quote-unquote infidel Muslims, and others to be butchered by these sociopaths who, by the way, will come at us next. How do I know that? Because they've told us, just the way Osama bin Laden told us what he was going to do. They make no secret about it. You can't wish away your enemy. But even if they weren't coming toward, even if they didn't promise to come kill us, which, again, they have done, we should still go in and destroy them. And when I say destroy, I use that word very specifically.
Right, that's what they're saying.
I don't want to compromise with them. I don't want to negotiate settlement. I want them dead or captured. I don't care which. But I want them defeated so that they cannot function as an army. That is what they are doing. And we have made a conscious decision as a country to allow it. I think it's a disgrace.
Well, this is one time when I think you might agree with your senator there in California, Dianne Feinstein, says it takes an army to defeat an army. I believe that we either confront ISIS now or we'll be forced to deal with an even stronger enemy in the future. Write it down. This is one time when Kurt Schlichter and Dianne Feinstein agree on something. Mark it down on your calendar.
I know. No one's more stunned than me. Californians have kind of a sneaking love for, not love, but even though she drives us crazy, we've always kind of respected Dianne Feinstein. She stood up to Bill Clinton when George Moscone and Harvey Milk were murdered in San Francisco, and I grew up there. She was the one who went out and announced it, and we remember that. Now, I don't agree with any of her politics, and I find her annoying many times, but she has often shown a willingness to stand up and stand for what she thinks is right, even when I don't exactly think it's right.
and when it's not popular. And I'm proud that we have at least one senator who is willing to stand against genocide. I never thought I'd have to go and say, hey, what a pleasant surprise. This guy doesn't like the mass murder of an entire people. Wow. I would think that's a given. Yeah. When they say never forget about the Holocaust, I must have been a sucker, because I'm not going to forget. Okay? This is the reason I served 27 years in the military. This is the reason American warriors fight. And I've seen them in peacekeeping operations, served in Kosovo, to help prevent a continuing genocide. And I'm unbelievably proud of it. I'm unbelievably proud of being in the American military, the greatest force for peace and human freedom in the history of mankind. And I know that putting ground troops in is going to mean casualties. I understand that. I've deployed before. I was in the Middle East for Desert Storm. But, living without honor is not really living.
Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Kurt Schlichter as we talk about his new book, Conservative Insurgency, The Struggle to Take America Back. We'll be back right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You've probably heard by now that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has asked the IRS to monitor churches and evaluate the sermons of pastors. At the moment, we don't know how the IRS plans to target pastors and churches. However they target these churches, they are certain to hear lots of sermons that address political issues. October 5th is when the annual Pulpit Freedom Sunday takes place. Alliance Defending Freedom has organized this event each year. They encourage pastors to preach a sermon that deals with public policy and politics. Then they encourage them to send a copy to the IRS. The ADF wants a test case to challenge the 1954 regulation that has been used to muzzle pastors in churches. The amendment to the federal tax code was added by Senator Lyndon Johnson. He was running for re-election and wanted to prevent outside groups, not churches, from interfering in his campaign. The amendment prevents a 501c3 organization from participating in any political campaign. Over the years, it has been used to intimidate pastors and prevent them from addressing any political issue from the pulpit. The latest revelations in the IRS scandal provide an insight into what IRS officials think about conservative political groups and religious organizations. Lois Lerner, a former IRS official who's been under investigation, called conservatives and Tea Party groups all sorts of names, most of which I can't mention here. We shouldn't be surprised that the IRS is now admitting that churches may be on their target list. The Alliance Defending Freedom is ready for the IRS to bring it on. For years, they have been looking for a test case. If the IRS cites one of these pastors preaching this October, then the pastor and the ADF lawyers will have standing and can pursue a case against the IRS. Meanwhile, the ADF has also filed a Freedom of Information Act request to learn the details of the IRS agreement with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That information might be as revealing as the emails from Lois Lerner. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
In our conversation today with Kurt Schlichter as we talk about his book, Conservative Insurgency. As I mentioned just a minute ago, in addition to being a trial lawyer, he certainly served with distinction with Operation Desert Storm, where he was a platoon leader. Also, of course, mentioned Operation Enduring Freedom in Kosovo and many other aspects. Not only has a law degree from Loyola Law School, but also a master's of strategic studies degree from the United States Army War College, to mention just a few. And Kurt, the book is fascinating because I guess we should talk about its origin. You were talking to a professor of history, University of California, San Diego, and you were saying, well, I'd like to do one on the oral history of the conservative movement, which I thought was a good idea. I mean, what happened? How did we get the Tea Party? And I'd like to talk to some of those people. And I was at that time not only doing radio, but we sometimes would do remote. So I remember doing remotes in places like Memphis and Oklahoma City and St. Louis and Kansas City. And I'd meet some of the people as it was kind of developing. And some of the people I've had around our roundtable on Friday were involved in that. But he said, no, that's probably not going to work. You know, there's all sorts of books about that. So you came up with, I think, an even more novel idea. You've written this sort of as a fictional book, looking back from the 2040s, if you will, to our day on how it happened. And so you're already assuming that conservatives win, number one, and are successful for then the reasons described in the book. Have I encapsulated it pretty well?
Yeah, what I decided to do, Kerby, was I wanted to do a different kind of book. I'm obviously a different kind of guy. And, I was a friend of Andrew Breitbart, as many people were, and he was an inspiration. He said, get out there, be part of the culture, and I thought that was a really smart way to play it. So instead of writing one of these typical conservative books where I get a picture of myself on the front cover, scowling with my arms clenched in a bow tie, looking like one of the bad guys in Animal House, I decided I'd do something a little different. I created this, I decided I wanted to paint a picture of what the world would look like if folks like us, if society embraced our views. That is, if we won the culture. And I don't mean just politics. I mean Hollywood, the media,
the
academia.
Culture, right, yeah.
The culture. So that the default position is the pro-liberty, constitutional, conservative values that we believe in. What would America look like? So I wanted to paint that picture. I wanted to create a fictional story of how we got there. So I created the professor character to go and take people through. I used him to kind of tie it together.
Right.
I wanted it to be something that was fun to read, that was interesting, that's funny, that'll make people mad. There are things in there. People are going, I can't believe that you're saying this will happen. I'm saying this will happen. I think it's likely. It could. It might not. But it's to spark discussions among conservatives because, unlike liberals, we enjoy debate. It's also to kind of complete the circle, show a picture of where we'd go, so people know what we're promising.
Well, and I think what you pointed out just a minute ago is that you worked with Breitbart on the big Hollywood, big government, big journalism, big peace sites and things like that. Of course, many people now know you as a columnist for Town Hall, but it's the broader issue. I unfortunately would have to say that a lot of people that are conservatives say, well, who are we going to elect in the next election? And I think you have to recognize that even if you were to take over the House and the Senate and the presidency, you still would have against you the academy, the media, all of Hollywood. You live in L.A., so I don't need to tell you that. And on, and the think tanks and all of that kind of thing. In other words, there needs to be a full cultural change. And you should never do this with a fictional book, but I'll reveal the last chapter. The last chapter is Victory. We changed the culture. Talk about that if you might.
At the end, again, I wanted to show what America would look like if we won. I think, I'm a trial lawyer. I go out and I try and convince jurors that the story I'm telling is the true one, and I have to tell them about the consequences of their choice. I have to, and so it was kind of a natural fit for me. If somebody comes to us, if we go to somebody, Kerby, and say, look, you should embrace these constitutional conservative values, and maybe that person doesn't know a lot about them, or maybe he's been misguided by some racial demagogue. Or maybe he's been too busy to be engaged. But that person does have a right to ask, okay, what would happen if?
What it looks like.
Exactly. Say I went with you. Is this going to be the preacher from Footloose banning dancing and drinking and kissing? Is that the America you're talking about?
Or is it the theocracy and the ayatollahs and all of those? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to be coming and marching us at bayonet point off to Sunday school? Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about some sort of Dickensian nightmare where, all but the super rich trudge off to work in the salt mines? Is that what you're about? And that's not what we're about. And that's one of the reasons I love, especially when I have a chance to talk to liberal audiences, because some of them bring me on, they're all hostile and everything. I want them to read the book. I want them to say, this is what we're about. Don't let somebody tell you anything. Listen to what I say. Really, you should listen to people, because they will. I'm a lawyer. I talk to people all the time. They will tell you eventually. They'll reveal the truth.
Right.
And if you see what we're really about, it kind of detonates their preconceptions. Because, Kerby, they really think that we're crazy. They really think that we're quasi-fascist. They really think that we're, some sort of tools of big corporations. As I point out in the book, conservatism isn't about big corporations. Conservatism is about free enterprise,
right,
which is very different. And there is a big problem with, and it's our critique of these big corporations that do use government to expand. They support the expansion of government because then they get their cut. And that's been one of the more controversial parts of my book. I take on some companies that
Chapter 6, sure, yeah.
Chapter 6, and fairly harshly. But, for instance, I don't understand why conservatives fall on their swords for people who do not support our principles.
Yeah, other than just the influence of media and the influence of money and things of that nature. Let me talk about media for just a minute, because that's one of your chapters where you reveal eventually that the news comes our direction. Now, we've gone from a time in which the mainstream media was all that there was. When Marlon Maddox started this show 40-plus years ago, he was trying to provide an alternative to Walter Cronkite, but now we have the alternative media, but still you have sort of the mainstream media there. But I get the sense, Kurt, and I sense from your book a real encouragement that facts matter, people pay attention to facts, and eventually these conservative ideas will win in a free interchange of ideas, and those who are trying to prevent an honest dialogue and discussion about those probably are not going to be successful in tamping down those ideas much longer.
No, you're absolutely right, Kerby. There are a number of factors in support of what we're doing. The first factor is the truth. People are experiencing the pain of liberalism. You've seen polls. Barack Obama is bottoming out. Nobody likes Obamacare. Nobody likes the way things are going. Pain is one of life's great teachers, and sometimes it's got to hurt. These millennials who are all happy about hope and change, when they're trying to pay off their degree in Marxist puppetry by working for $8 an hour in a Starbucks, that's a kind of pain that really can make an impression. In fact, there are characters in the book who that's exactly the impression it makes. Mm-hmm. Other things, the next thing is lack of intimidation. Conservatives aren't intimidated anymore. We're out, we're open, we're speaking, and we are attempting to move into the mainstream. I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting there. Then there's technological change. Remember when there were 3 channels?
Yeah.
Now there's 3,000.
That's right.
And our voices are being heard. We can get around the gatekeepers, and we do, not just Fox, but even shows like yours, getting on Twitter, getting on Facebook, writing at Town Hall. They can't shut us up. And I think it's interesting that the left is very, very concerned with actually changing the First Amendment to limit the scope of free speech.
I thought that was amazing. Who wants to be on that side? You've done moot court, and you've probably done debate when you were a kid in high school and things like that. Yeah. Who wants that side?
who wants the side? Yeah, we
want to shut down all debate.
Too expansive.
Yeah, we're liberals, but we don't want any ideas out there. Yeah. Oh,
well,
man.
No, it's shameful, especially for a guy like me. I risked my life to fight for the Constitution. I swore an oath to defend it to my death, an oath that never expires.
Yes,
as a United States Army officer. And, I take this stuff really seriously. And when somebody says, the First Amendment, there are too many people out there spreading their ideas. What they're really saying is, oh my gosh, we can't control the debate. Let's send guys with guns to put people in prison who say things we don't like.
That's pretty bad. We need to take a break, but when we come back, we'll maybe talk about the issue of law, because this, of course, is a trial lawyer, and his chapter especially on breaking and remaking the law. When everything is a crime, everyone is a criminal. We've talked about the over-criminalization of America. He also mentioned Twitter. Let me just mention he's on Twitter at Kurt Schlichter, and you can follow that if you have trouble spelling his name. It's on our website there, and we have information about his book in case you would like to order it. We have an article that is from Town Hall on Middle East Peace is Total Victory, and of course we have a link to his website, which will also put you to his Twitter account. So we've given you an opportunity to connect up with him, but if you'd like to connect up online or by phone, that number 1-800-351-1212. Much more to talk about in the book Conservative Insurgency. We'll talk about that with him and you right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Kurt Schlichter with us as we talk about his book, Conservative Insurgency, The Struggle to Take America Back, 2009 to 2041. We've talked about the key to a lasting Middle East peace is a total victory. That's one of his articles. We've talked a little bit about the influence of the Tea Party. We've talked about the media. And I thought, Kurt, for just a minute, we might talk about law. After all, you have a law degree, and your chapter 10, Breaking and Remaking the Law. When everything is a crime, everyone is a criminal. A Heritage Foundation a while back put together the over-criminalization of America, and I think it is fair to say that essentially every one of us breaks some law, probably many laws, every single day. And so this is why there's a very strong conservative, dare I even use the word libertarian argument to say, wait a minute, when we have too many laws, too many regulations, a despot, a tyrant, or just an unfeeling bureaucrat could pretty much put anybody behind bars, and that's not what we want in America. No, it isn't. And some, especially people not familiar with conservatives, Kerby, think they are stunned that we are standing up against over-criminalization, as if we somehow, like a giant government power coming in and turning where'd that come
sovereign,
from?
Exactly. So, free citizens into serfs terrified of the man with a gun. Let me give you a little background. I grew up with cops coming in to do search warrants on our kitchen table when my mom was a DA and later a judge.
Wow.
Okay, I helped do law enforcement during the riots. As a National Guard officer, many of my friends are police officers. I have nothing but respect for them and what they do. That being said, I don't think that we are serving our law enforcement people very well by having them enforce a panoply of pseudo-crimes that aren't really criminal. I mean, when we were at the point of putting somebody in jail for gathering rainwater on his own property.
In Oregon, yeah.
Exactly. That's just stupid. It's un-American. It's wrong. How did it come to this? How did Congress, first of all, abdicate its responsibility to pass laws by allowing bureaucrats to create regulations with criminal penalties? That's crazy to me. I don't think it's constitutional, and I am certainly hoping somebody challenges it. If we as a society are going to take someone's liberty, I think that should at least have a majority vote of both houses and be signed by the president.
Wow. Well, another aspect of that is Chapter 5, where you talk about lawfare, where it's hand-to-hand combat in the courts, because some of those are laws, some of those are regulations, others are precedents. You're a trial lawyer. I'd love to hear what, again, is the vision that we want to project of what it looks like in a free and fair America that maybe removes a lot of the regulations, removes a lot of the extraneous laws, and also has a courtroom where anybody has a chance to succeed, not just the wealthy and influential.
Well, exactly, Kerby. Now, a lot of conservatives are supposed to not hate the courts and not want to give people their day in court. And look, I defend companies. That's what I do. And many lawsuits are frivolous, and I'm a big supporter of tort reform. However, the main, most important purpose of our courts is to protect and vindicate the rights of free American citizens. That is the number one purpose. When you go to court to say that your civil rights have been violated by a government agency, that is the highest purpose of our courts, is to protect our civil rights. And conservatives have been using using that avenue, and they need to continue to do it. And I think there's a huge payoff there because what's happening is just nuts. The IRS is choosing political opponents of the president and using its power to harass and oppress them so that they cannot participate in our political system. Just think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Think about that. The answer is the courts with juries and judicial officers who stand up and say, our duty is to our Constitution, not to the guy I preferred on the ballot, but to our constitutional principles. You can't do that
and you are going to pay the price and be held accountable. That is the highest purpose. And you conservatives, you always talk about judicial activism. Courts should be active in the preservation of our civil rights.
While we're talking about civil rights, I remember one of your columns a while back where you were talking about the fact that, I think it was something like, liberals have never met a civil right they didn't like. And again, there's a misunderstanding here. You know, we have racial tension right now. Of course, we think about what's happening in Missouri and other places around the country. Civil rights in the proper sense are ones that, again, conservatives support, but civil rights as defined by the left oftentimes are not. Clarify that, if you might.
Well, it's very easy, Kerby. I've got this thing called the Constitution. got these amendments to it. Boom. That's where they are. And what's staggering to me, what's really actually it's a little bit frightening, is that liberals do not respect the civil rights set forth in the Constitution. Every American should be fiercely defending every single one of them. The right to free speech, they want to limit it. The right to petition the government, they want to ignore us. The right to freely exercise our religion, they are against that. The Second Amendment, let's not even get started. I think that they're torn about the Third Amendment because they hate soldiers.
They don't know what to do with the Third Amendment.
To the extent they know, to the extent that they'd like to mess with soldiers by not giving them shelter, but the chance to screw with property owners, it's almost too tempting to pass up.
Yeah.
The only one they seem to like is exactly the only one they seem to like is the Fifth Amendment.
Fifth Amendment, yeah. Well, again, I mean, these are the so-called Bill of Rights, and I think even today, my commentary today just happens to be on that whole issue of whether or not pastors can address political issues from the pulpit. That goes all the way back to 1954 when Landslide Lyndon, who won just barely, actually won by hook or crook, and I'm heavy on the crook parts, in 1948, and so was facing re-election and having some trouble from the Hunt brothers, and so slipped in this thing that said a 501c3 organization cannot advocate a political stance. Well, he was really trying to get at the anti-communist groups, not at the churches, but since that time, as you well know, pastors have been fearful about even addressing this issue, and that's why there's been an attempt by the Alliance Defending Freedom to force an issue and to actually have someone withstanding to challenge this thing that was slipped in without really much of a vote or consideration in 1954 by Senator Lyndon Johnson.
Well, I think it's crazy. Let me just say this out loud and see if this strikes you as nuts. The IRS is now going to go in and monitor the content of pastors' sermons. What the blankety blank? Did I miss an asterisk in the First Amendment? Is there a footnote there that didn't get covered on the bar exam?
It's one of those penumbras they talk about there in law school, I guess.
Oh, they're emanating something. And it isn't, I mean, does anyone... I am convinced that liberals do not believe in civil rights. I am convinced that they consider them an obstacle to their power. This is nuts. And, I don't see the ACLU out there. I don't see any liberals out there. I think it's disgraceful. And, if what really scares me, and the book talks about this, if you destroy the norms and the values of our society and the protections of personal liberties, the only thing that's left is power. And where did Mao say power comes from? Well, the barrel of a gun.
Barrel of a gun. Of course, that sounds a little bit like Saul Alinsky, too, but we don't know anybody that has ever studied under him, so that's not a big issue.
No, there's nobody like that out there. But if you lose the moral basis of government and it just becomes about power, then, anybody can wield power. We see that around the world. Do we want an America where our government is run by who has the most guns? Liberals might not like the way that ends.
I don't think so either. When we come back from the break, though, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about culture, because one of the things that I think this does in the book is remind us that our battle isn't just in the political arena, although you certainly have chapters about guerrilla politics. We've talked about law, and we've talked about the media in some, as well as what is happening in our legal system. But back to the point, you have a chapter there about how Hollywood went conservative. Boy, there's a freezing up of the netherworld or something like that. And also in the victory, we changed the culture. And I think it's important for our listeners to hear about what you think also need to be some cultural changes, because that gets back to the comment you made just a minute ago about the norm. So we're going to take a break, and probably not going to have much time for phone calls today, but if you want to try to slip one in, we might get you in. And if not, we're going to continue our conversation with Kurt Schlichter. By the way, the book is entitled Conservative Insurgency. We might also talk about how this is really an insurgency. You are less likely to find leaders. And the conservative movement used to have people like William F. Buckley in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But this are a lot of people you've probably never heard names of, but they're making a difference. And we'll talk about that with him and you right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kurt Schlichter with us for a few more minutes as we talk about his book, Conservative Insurgency, The Struggle to Take America Back. It is a book that I think you really would enjoy, 280 pages. You won't agree with everything. I'm not sure he agrees with everything he says in the book, but certainly gives you a sense of what could indeed happen over the next couple of decades and what needs to happen if we're going to make the case. And we have a link to his website, We also have an article that is from Town Hall, the most recent one, and also, of course, we have information about the book. You can get it from his book site if you would like. We also have it on our Point of View store because we thought you would really enjoy getting a copy. And look for it in your local bookstore, but we know sometimes they don't show up there, so we've made it very easy for you to order it. And just before we get into the issue of culture, I wanted to come back to what I mentioned just as we came to the break, conservative insurgency. You think of the American Revolution. We know who the leaders were. It was John Adams and Samuel Adams, and it was George Washington, and later on with the Constitutional Convention, it was James Madison, and of course the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, and you go on and on and on, Roger Sherman. I think most people, if forced to come up with some of the leaders today in the conservative movement, probably would kind of have this blank stare because it really is more of an insurgency than anything I've seen before.
Yeah, Kirby, it really is. Now, I'm a military guy, so I think in those terms. I went to the Army War College where I actually wrote my own thesis.
Oh, yeah. Unlike somebody in Montana, but we'll get to that another day.
Yeah, they're going to grind his name off that plaque. It's really disgraceful. But look, this is an insurgency. It's not about a charismatic leader. Look, I like Reagan as much as anybody. He signed my commission to become a U.S. Army officer. I saw him at his last campaign appearance ever in 1984 in San Diego. He is my hero. There is no new Reagan. There's no white knight coming. This is something we've got to do ourselves. I hate to say that Barack Obama was right, but we are the ones we're waiting for. We're going to do it.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yes.
We're using our abilities, whatever they are. You're great on the radio. I write stuff. Other people may just meet friends at church and spread the word that way, or maybe get on Facebook, or maybe they'll set a Tea Party rally, or maybe they'll run for their local Republican committee and get some of those old fossils who aren't doing anything off there. The bottom line is all of us can figure out what we're going to do. We don't need a memo. We don't need to be community organized. We're entrepreneurial. We do it ourselves.
That's right.
The Tea Party came from nowhere. Occupy, well, that was a top-down organization. They blew the dog whistle, and all the dirtbags showed up. The Tea Party, it was regular American citizens standing up, doing it because they wanted to in their own way. That's the difference. And that makes it difficult for our opponents. There's no head of the snake to chop off.
Yeah, they're really looking for someone right now just for their appeal letters. Somebody, they're looking for the Jerry Falwell. They're looking for the whoever it might be, that Pat Robertson. Somebody, we need somebody that we can really go and vilify because we need it for our appeal letters. But
it's the guy pushing impeachment.
Yeah.
Which I guess Sarah Palin mentioned in passing.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's out to every left-wing sucker. Boy, I wish I knew how to convince liberals to give me money. That'd be fun.
That'd be fun. But the point you're making is it is all of us doing whatever we can in our sphere of influence, which brings me to the other point I wanted to focus on just before we run out of time, and that is culture. Because I think, Kurt, part of the problem is a lot of our listeners, and probably less so because they listen to this program, but a lot of conservatives, a lot of Christians in general say, we just elect the right guy, and then 4 years from now, make sure we elect the right guy again, but after a while, we just go back and raise our families. And that's not what we're talking about. There is a cultural change that needs to take place, and that's sort of upstream from politics, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly how Andrew Breitbart put it. A lot of, particularly social conservatives, the conservative Christian crew, is appropriately disgusted by much of our popular culture and kind of withdraws. But we can't withdraw. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to people like me who watch HBO's True Detective with the bad language and the nudity, and people who don't. Equally, we are both participants in this, and and there are values, common values, that we need to fight for. And first of all, we're winning. Look at many of these family-friendly films that are generally considered conservative.
Good point.
They're doing fantastically. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a big believer in you make quality entertainment first, and then your message follows. And sometimes we don't do that, but we're getting better at it as we do it more. And I think more conservatives are going to go into media because, A, they see that there's an opportunity, but B, there's technology once again. The gateway, the walls are falling. Because, it used to be you'd have to go get a 35 millimeter camera and a director of photography and a sound guy and all that stuff.
Yeah, go to USC, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Exactly. Now you can get a couple buddies with a $3,000 camera and do almost theatrical level work. Content has become cheap.
Yes.
That means anybody can get in, and suddenly everybody's in play. I know these Hollywood guys. I've dealt with them. I've had a screenplay of mine optioned. They're sharks. And, yeah, most of them are liberal. But you know what overcomes liberalism? The smell of money.
The money. That's right.
And there are a lot of, the conservative community is completely underserved. My next thing is I see a space in the market with the tragic loss of Vince Flynn and Tom Clancy. There's a huge space for pro-American military thrillers with the kind of that reinforce the conservative values of a guy like Brad Thor.
Very true. Yes,
I think there's a huge space for that, and I've got 3 chapters done.
Well, we're going to have to talk about that, too. What you were talking, too, about, even one of your columns talked about conservatism is the new punk rock. Now, that's probably obscure to about half of our listeners, but nevertheless, it's on the ascendancy. And as you pointed out just before, that what you have happened already in the area of media, we're doing talk radio, and when Marlon Maddox first put this up back almost 40 years ago now, but certainly about 35 years ago when they were on the first on satellite, that was before you even had the Rush Limbaughs and all the other people. But now you got, like you said, you don't have 3 channels, you have 3,000 channels. Well, the same thing in Hollywood. Now you have individuals and even churches producing Hollywood quality films and documentaries, and more of that to come. And so I think that's a good encouragement to any of our listeners out there that might have some skills in cinematography or writing. And so
why not?
Just sign up. You're part of the insurgency, right?
If you've got talent, go out there. The market's going to tell you if you're any good. People who aren't good, find something else to do after you figure out you're not any good at it. If you are good, keep doing it. The thing about punk rock, and I think it's great that conservative Christians, the social conservatives, and guys like me, who's an L.A. lawyer, and I like punk rock and I like all that other stuff, can come together over common values. Here's the thing about punk rock. It's not that it was just loud and fast and awesome. It's that it was a rebellion against a fat, flabby rock and roll establishment that got away from the real heart of rock, which is, energy, excitement, and vitality. And they put that back in the music, and they did it themselves. They went out and pressed those 7-inch records. Mm-hmm. They made those cassettes. They sold them out of the back of the cars. And the guys who were good, who came out of that, are guys you hear about today, like you too.
Right. And so, again, that's another insurgency. Just about out of time, but I think, again, just maybe an encouragement for people to read some of your columns. We enjoy reading you. And, again, a fascinating book, and I appreciate the fact that not only have you been writing some of these columns, but these books, but also that you gave us an hour today here on Point of View.
Well, I've had a great time. I really appreciate it, and it's a lot of fun to be able to take seriously some of the ideas in the book for your listeners.
Well, it was great, and we'd like to do that again. We are out of time, though, so Kurt, thank you for joining us. And just before we say goodbye, let me mention that we do have the various interviews that we have done, and it's available on the website, pointofview.net. If you'd like to know a little bit more about his book, you can click on the picture of the book, or you can go to the web link, and that will take you to kurtschlichter.com. And if you don't know how to spell it, good news is we've got the link there, making it real easy for you as well. So I would encourage you to look at that. Also, you might want to look at some of his columns, the one we posted today. The key to a lasting Middle East peace is total victory. Apologize we didn't get any phone calls on the air. We will have more opportunity tomorrow, but certainly wanted to take the time today to give you a chance to hear from him. And tomorrow we're looking forward to a couple of great interviews, also talking about the Barna Research Group, and we also have a very intelligent and I think very interesting discussion with John Stonestreet and Sean McDowell about same-sex marriage. So all of that coming up tomorrow, and if you'd like to join us then, we'd certainly encourage you to do so. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.